Hello everyone, and welcome to the second session of RICHCODE's Python classes. And in today's class, we're going to be going over more variables, and then specifically, we're going to start looking into strings after. So last class, we stopped at Booleans. So a Boolean is basically like an on-off switch where it's either on or it's off. You cannot have any other way. There's no other states. You can't have in the middle. And for a Boolean, it's you can either set it directly to true or false with a capital T in true or a capital F in false, or you can set it so that Python can evaluate something for you. For example, here we can see that 1 is less than 2 is true since 1 is less than 2. And using the type method, we can see that this is a Boolean type. And then there are a couple things you can do with Booleans. So like that include the or, the and the not method. So for the or method to work between A or B, only one of them has to be true. And the way Python and most programming languages evaluate this is it checks for A first. If A is true, it doesn't check B, since we are guaranteed to return true from A or B if A is true. If A is false, then we check B. So in this case, we have 2 is less than 1 or 1 is less than 2. In this case, 2 is less than 1, we know is false because 2 is greater than 1. And then we have the or, and then 1 is less than 2. And since 1 is less than 2 is true, a false or true statement returns us true. And then the next case is the not method. The not method basically does exactly what you think it does. If it's true, it returns false. If it's false, it returns true. So if not of 2 is less than 1, it would return true. Since 2 is less than 1, and that's false, and not false is true. And then finally, the and method is it only returns true if both statements are true. So that just means if it's A and B, A has to be true and B has to be true for them to be true. If A is false, it does not evaluate B, since since it is known that A and B would be false. So in this case, 2 is less than 1 is false, since 2 is greater than 1. So A would just be false and would not, and the Python would not actually evaluate 1 is less than 2. And again, we see that A is still Boolean. And then since other than sharing less than, greater than, use or and, we can also see equivalence and non-equivalence. So for equivalence, we can either use the equals equals method, or we can do and both of these methods work. Sorry. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay. Oh, okay, sorry, I mixed something up. And if we were to compare two objects, so if we set B equals 2 equals to 2, 3 equals to 1, we can do, if we want to compare two equal things that could be equal, we can use the A EQ and using the a dot underscore underscore equal dot underscore underscore, it checks if the two objects mentioned are equal. And since in this case both of these were false, it would print out false. And then to compare non-equivalents, we can just use the exclamation equals. And so if we set a to the Boolean 2 is not equal to 1, we will see that a is true since 2 is not equal to 1. And then let's say, and then and if we have something true, even in this case, we can do not of it still and still get true since these two statements are opposites. And so if you don't want to use the exclamation point equals, you can use the underscore underscore equal underscore underscore in the parentheses function. And then you just have to take the not of that. And then in programming, we call text a string. A string is a collection of letters usually, so it makes sense. But in Python and in most languages, you are allowed to put basically anything in the string. So I could say like my name equals Jaden. Or I could set name and then or I could set address equals to 3300 street. I could do that, and both of these would be valid. Since we're setting name and address to the valid values. The one thing you may need to watch out for is the special characters. So if you use the backslash in Python, a backslash denotes that your next character will be a special character. And such special characters can be /n, which means new line, /b, which is backspace, /f, which is format. So but then there are also some characters like /a, which do not do anything. So if I were to set my address to 3300 street /a, it would work. But and it would accept this since Google Colab has identified it. But it would print out /x07 instead. It would not print out /a. If we want to print out a slash, or use a slash in our string, we need to do 2 slashes. And that just tells Python that we want to actually print out the slash instead of using a special character. So if we change address to add a /a at the end, and then we printed out address, it would print 3300 street /a. Okay. And then in Python, it doesn't really matter if you use single quotes or double quotes for your strings. In other languages, it does, but not Python. Like, so we could run name is this and it will work. We want fine for double brackets or quotation, and also single brackets would result in the same thing. But if we were to implement, let's say, single brackets on one side and double brackets on the other, it will show an error. It must always be opened and closed with the same type of bracket. And the same thing will happen if you just don't have a second bracket at all. Like in this case, there's a single bracket, but then there's no back bracket here, so it would turn a syntax error. And a syntax is the arrangement of words in a sentence, or in this case, the arrangement and order of words in this program. So this syntax error just means you did something Python wasn't expecting, or Python expected something that you were to do, but you just forgot it. And EOL stands for end of line. So it means that Python reached the end of the line and did not find a closing of the string. But if we were to add this bracket to the end, it would work. But if we were to remove it again, it would throw the same EOL. And in order to use a multi-line string, so since usually if you were to call something like name equals Bob, Joe, if you did this normally, it would return an error since there's not the string is not enclosed properly. In order to actually enclose it properly, we have to use the 3 single brackets. So sorry, 3 single quote apostrophes. So, and if we do that, whatever is stored inside the string over multiple lines until it sees the 3 apostrophes again, will be stored in name. And if we click in, all the new lines are stored as well. But if we, let's say, were to remove this, we would get an incomplete input since it reaches the end of the program this time, but doesn't find the end. And one other issue is if we want to use an apostrophe or a double apostrophe in our string, just using it directly would cause issues. So let's say we had this silly string where it says he said, aren't, can't, shouldn't, wouldn't. And it was enclosed in single apostrophes. Now the issue with this string is Python interprets the next apostrophe as closing the string. It does not interpret it as an apostrophe in your text. So there are a couple ways of fixing this, since as you can see, this part is not a string and will cause a syntax error. One way is to just use a multi-line string. And you can just keep it in one line, and anything enclosed in it will not be interpreted as syntax. And the other way is using something called the escape string. And escaping just adds a backslash before each quotation mark or special character that you want to have to do something different. Like in this case, if we were to remove this, it would return this part would cause an error. But once we add it back, slash apostrophe or slash quotation marks tells Python that what you are looking for, sorry, what you mean is the actual apostrophe or the actual quotation mark. You don't, it doesn't tell, it tells Python that what you mean is not to close the string. And then to embed values in your string. So let's say we have a string and we want to put 2 numbers in it. There's 2 ways of doing it. Either we can either convert the numbers into string variables and attach the strings to each other. We can create a tuple and merge the strings together, or we can embed the value. So embedding the value means we use the percentage s, which basically tells Python that whatever percentage s there, you want to replace. So in this case, we have message, and it's I scored percentage s points. If we were to just print message, it would just print percentage as points. Since we haven't given anything for Python to replace it with. But if we were to do message percentage my score, we're telling Python to replace the first percentage s with my score. And once we do that, Python will print I scored and then my score, the value of my score, and then points. And if we were to change this to, let's say 300, it will print I scored 300 points. And we're allowed to do that in more than one. We can have more than one percentage s. Like for example, if we had nums and we said to what the number percentage s, say the number percentage s. Nice belt. If we were to just print nums, it would just get percentage s, percentage s. And if we did 0 directly, it will get an error. It will throw an error because you have more than one percentage s in your string, but you only have one thing after the percentage here. So in order to fix that, we do the following. We do percentage and then in parentheses, we put the number of things. So if we said like add like 3 percentage s at the end, we would have to add 3 to the back. And it would do that. And if we also added, if we had one too many, it would also throw an error since we have too many arguments for it. And then, and the other way we can do it is using the key character F outside of the string. So if we did my score equals 1000, we can set message to F, which means format, then the apostrophe, and then the string. And inside the string, in order to insert a variable, we can put it inside the curly brackets and then points. So if we were to run this, it would say I scored 1000 points, and it would do the same exact thing as if we ran this statement up here. And however, if we had this, if we didn't put anything inside of it, you would get an error since you can't have something empty in here. You always have to fill it with something. And the other issue, the only reason why you don't always use the F is you cannot have a backslash and then in the F string. So, and then we can also multiply strings. To multiply a string, it just does, it kind of does what you think it does. It does everything you do. Sorry, it basically, it's say we multiplied the string A, B, C by 10. Then it would just print out A, B, C 10 times in a row. So if we did that here, it would just print out A, B, C 10 times in a row. And if we can change this to, let's say, with 1300 of A, it would just print out a very, very long string of A's. And then if we were to just print without anything at all, then it would just create an empty space. And this is also useful in formatting. If we set spaces to space times 25, we would, and then whenever we do percentage s space White House or percentage s, and then some under actual string, and then percentage spaces, it would always print out exactly that many spaces. As we can see here, there are 25 spaces ahead of it. And then grammar. So expression is basically expression, like expression operator expressions, which are things like the slashes, the modulus, the times, the equals, and expression usually gives you a number at the end, or a true or false. And then operators, you have four main ones: the plus, the minus, which do what you think, the times, and the slash, and the division. And then there's also the power function, and so on. And then numbers are like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you can have a lot of numbers on end. And for example, if we were to print 4 minus 5, it would print what the expression 4 minus 5 equals. And printing 4 minus 5 gives you -1. Okay. So if I were to tell you to try what 4 times 10 is, what would you guys get? What would print 4 times 10 give you? Please put it in the chat. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, and then now since we're basically almost done with strings, I'll give you guys a couple review questions to make sure you guys understood. So if I set spaces equals, sorry, okay. So I'm going to put, let's say triangle equals, so I set triangle to that. And then I set triangle equals 10 times triangle. Okay, sorry, let me change that. I set triangle to just dot and then 2 dots. And then I printed triangle. Sorry, I was asked print half of triangle. What would print half of triangle give you? This right here. Uh, Jude, if like actually print out what triangle is. And it would, I'll give you guys like a minute more to print it out. Sorry about that. Like open. Okay. Oh, it's not. Okay, so all the people who printed out a dot or 3 dots in a row on the line, that is incorrect. It will print out dot, then 2 dots. If we use, remember, if we use Wait, sorry, skip past it. If we use a multi-line comment, remember it keeps all your enters and new lines after it. As we can see here, if we had name as my name is Richard, new line 15 years ago, I am 15 years ago, and a new line, and then I teach Scratch and Python. As you can see, it prints the new lines. So back to where we were here, it has a dot, and then two dots. So it just print out dot and then two dots on the next line. Okay. And now if we say okay, so if we were to run this, what would happen? Yeah, that's correct. It will return an error because we don't have enough arguments for it to convert. So now if we added arguments, what would happen? What would happen now? Yeah, that's correct, Jude. It has too many numbers since there's only 5% S's, but there are 6 numbers here, and it will be seen if we ran it. So now what would print out if we ran this? Okay, yeah, Andrew is correct, but Jeremy, remember, other than the percentage S part, yeah, the rest of the string is still printed. Otherwise, there'd be no point of the string being there. Okay, so there's a way that's if we were to normally, let's say, have A equals 10 and B equals hello. If we were to do A plus B, if we were to run it, we would get a type error because they are different types. And the way Python fixes this is to make you convert your string, convert your things together. So in order to do that, there are ways to convert it. So one way is the str method. And the str method just converts whatever's inside of it to a string to the best of its ability. So if we have A equals str of 98.6, we would have 98.6 in quotes. And if we were to print the type of A, we would see it's a string. And now using the same thing, if we had A equals 10 and S is ABC, If we were to print S plus A directly, we would get a type error. But if we casted str into a string, sorry, if we casted A into a string, then it would run properly and it would print ABC10. And then concatenating a string normally just works like this. We have two strings and we can just add them together. And using the same str method, we can also convert a Boolean. If it's true and we convert the str, it returns true. If it was false, we click the str and we get false. And it doesn't just have to be a float or something to a string. It can go the other way around. Like we can convert a float of negative 98.6 in quotes, which means a float of a string. As long as this itself is a float, you will not have any errors. But if I were to add a letter B at the end, it would throw an error since you cannot convert 98.6b to a float. And if we were to just convert an integer, it would just add a 0.0 at the end since a float always has a decimal portion. And then the same thing applies with the integer. So if we were to convert an integer of a normal of a certain number in quotes, like negative 123 in quotes, it would work since negative 123 is a normal number. If we were to add, let's say, a random letter in it, it would throw a type error. If we were to add a decimal to it, it would also throw a type error because adding a decimal to it is a float and an int cannot support a float. And then if we mix different number types, Python will try to do conversion for you. And you can't convert strings. You can't normally mix strings with numbers unless the operation makes sense. And the only operations that usually make sense are combining strings and duplicating strings. But if we were to say add an integer and a float, as we see here, it will always convert it to a float for you since it's thinking you want a float back. So if we were run it, we will get 3.0. But if we were to remove the 0.0 at the end, it would think since you're using two integers, it would use two integers and it will return an integer. So now it returns 3 with no decimal point. And if it's false in Python, false just means 0. So if I do false plus 3, it would just do 0 plus 3, which is 3. If I did true plus 3, it would return 4, since in most programming language, false is 0 and true is 1. If we were to do 3.88 plus int of 28, it would also work since we're typecasting 28 into an int and adding a float and an int lets your code work normally if you're adding them together. And we cannot directly convert a float in string form to an integer directly, as we see here when we add a decimal point. But if we have a float here, we can convert it to an int. And what Python does is it truncates. What Python does is it truncates every single thing after the decimal point. So if we had 3.88, it would go down to 3. If we were to do If we did 2.99, it would convert down to 2. But if we did 3.01, it would convert down to 3. It's negatives, it still truncates it. It doesn't just round down always or round up always. It just truncates it. Okay, so now if we were to add two strings of numbers together, it would not add the things together directly. It will just put them back next to each other. So if we, on this fourth line, if we did print of str of 3.88 plus str of 28, it would return 3.8828 instead of 3.88, sorry, 21, instead of 21.88. Okay, now if I were to say print, if I were to run print of int of 4.0 plus the float value of the string value of 0.875, what would you get as an output? Yeah, 4.875 is correct. Now, if I were to remove the float, what would happen? Okay. Both of all of you guys who answered, both Jude and ETL, and both of you guys are wrong. Since we're adding a int and a string together, remember what that does. It throws an error, since you cannot add a string and an integer together. Okay. Now, if we did print int of 4.0 plus int of 0.875, what would we get? Yeah, 4 is correct. Since it truncates everything after the decimal on both, and 4 plus 0 is just 4. Okay. Now we'll go over some more things related to strings. So let me first do this. No, oops. Oh, so Jude, if you do 0.875, Python and most interpreters, if you type it after the 0.875, right after it, it'll think you meant to fill in the parentheses. So you have to type it at the end of it in order for it to run. Sorry, I'll give an example before. So 0.875. That works. But if I try to, okay, wait, no, wait, never mind. It's just some interpreters, if you type the 0.875 because it did that, 0.875, and you type again, it thinks you're just filling it in the parentheses instead of putting in one at the end. And then after you can type the parentheses. So some other methods you need to know with a string. First of all is length. In order to do that, we just use the len method. And all we have to do is len of name. And since name in this case is Kevin, which is 6 characters long, if we print the length of Kevin, or oops, I need to run that first. If we print the name of Kevin, we would just get 6. And to concatenate strings, we can just do plus. So it'd be hello space world. In order to concatenate it, we can just do string str1 plus str2 plus str3. And now we'll get hello world. Now remember, you can't do it with an int and a string together. And multiplying strings is technically just adding a string certain number of times. So if we have str1 is a, and str2 is a times 5. If we print str2, it will print out a 5 times, which is the same as printing out a 5 times. Okay, and then if we set str1 to a, we set str2 to b, and we have str3. If we were to print out str3, what would we get? Yeah, that's correct. Okay, now if I did that, what would we get? If we changed str3? It would be AB 3 times. Yeah, okay. Okay, so in order to get a certain character in your string, let's say they entered hello, and you need to determine if the H is uppercase or lowercase. You can use the index method. And index is basically location in memory. So if basically think of an index as a position in line, and it's the number of people in front of you. So if you're at the front of the line, you would get an index of 0 because there's nobody in front of you. And index is position 1 if there is one person in front of you. The reason why it is the number of people in front of you and not the place you are in line is because in most languages, including Python, everything starts getting indexed at 0. So the length is James Bond, except J would be index of 0. So if we were to print length of name, 9. Then it would just print out the last element since it's from it has index 0 to index 9. And if you want to go from the back, you can use the negative method. So basically, it is negative 10. So it just goes back 10 characters from the end of the string, which is J. And if we did negative 14, wait. Wait. Oh, okay. I think my version of Python here is slightly out of. Normally you can do this, it's just I think the version of Python I have on here is slightly out of date because I'm using an older version. But basically it would return go back from the front. Okay, so let's say I set name to, if I were to do the following, print the name of the length of the name minus one, what would I get? No, it would not be seven. It would be, no, I didn't run this series. It would be n since that's the last character of the string. And if I asked what the length of the name is, what would you get? If I asked you what the length of this string is, what would you get? Okay. If we were to run it, we would have the length is 22. Because this is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. We include all the spaces as part of the length. So if I added another space here, we set name to that, and we ask name, it would be 23. Because there may only be there's only 18 characters, non-space characters, but there are some who spaces count in the length. That's all. And since it's always zero index, the last position is always the length of the name minus one. So, and since this case it's n, then it's n. And minus seven, this version I have right now doesn't work, but it should be s since that's 7 characters from the back for this one. Now let's say I were to set name to hello. And now I want you to print name of 10. You would get a very big issue called an index error since 10 is outside of the length of hello. Hello is only 5 characters long. If we were to try to print 10, we will get a string index out of range. And remember that name of -1, -1 is the last character, and we can just keep going back. But if we were to go way too far back, it would start throwing an error. So a way to string slice, which is also known as the substring, is basically used mostly when you only want a portion of the variable. So wait, let me set name equals James. Okay, so I have name is James Bond. And if we print name of -600 to -1, it just prints from the back end, very beginning to the second to last character. Since the last position is always excluded, it will print James Bond since the D is excluded. And another way you can do it is start, stop, and step. And in order to do that, it takes how many steps before the next character is put. So if we had James Bond and we wanted 0 to 5, so James, and steps of 2. So we see J first. And there's 2 steps from J gives you M. And then 2 steps from M gives you S. So the output of that would just be JMS. So if I were to print name of 3 colon, what would you get if I were to print it? Oh, sorry, never mind. Basically, another way you can do things is you don't have to specify an end index or a start index. You And a way to specify the end index, if you don't specify the end index, it just goes to the end of the string. As shown here, it goes up the way to bond. If you don't specify the start index, it just starts from the beginning of the string. And if you don't specify both, it'll just do the whole entire string. And if instead you do a step of -1, meaning it goes backwards in the string, it would just turn your string around. And you can use a combination of this. And a way to combine it, like we can do like this, where it's a print name of 100 to the end of the string to 3. And this will always return nothing if your string is less than length 100 because the starting index is greater than 100. Okay, so let's say I set name to okay, so I set Okay, so I set name to Jeremiah's Smith friend Kevin. Now, if I were to do name of uh this, what would I get? Yeah, Felix, you're correct. You would get the whole entire thing. Now, if I set the step to 2, what would you get? Uh, Jude, you would not be correct. Since if I do this, it means it go if the first one, if there's no start and end index, it does the whole entire it looks at the whole entire string and it takes every other character. So if I were to print it, it would take the J, skip a E, take a R, skip a E, take a M, skip a I, take a skip a H. It takes every other character, including the first one. Because it's the since what the third one does is it's the number of steps between each character. Okay, so now if I did 1 and 3, what would we get? If I were to print name, start is 1. There's no end index, it's 3 steps. What would we get? Okay, so what happens basically is it takes the first it's starting from the first character, so E, since Python is 0 indexed, it takes every third character. So it takes E, it skips 2, it prints M. It skips 2, it takes H, it skips 2, and then M, and so on. So if I were to run it, it would take the E, then the M, then the H, then the M. Okay, Felix, you have to be careful about the step. If this is 3, it means it skips 2 characters in between. If it was 2, I would only skip 1 in between. So yeah, Jude is correct. Okay. Uh,